Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending where you are joining us from around the world. Welcome to our Class Teams Automation webinar. My name is Dominic Williamson, and I'm here today to deliver this next hour of content. So let's jump into it, because we do have a very busy agenda for everyone together today. Let's have a look at today's agenda. We'll be covering 4 key topics, resources for today's session, an overview of automation with class teams and some real examples of it being done today, school data sync, and Microsoft Graph as your options to automate at scale. So everything that you will need for today, all of the slides and samples, you will have access to from the website. So I'm also going to put that into the chat window, but please make sure you click on the link and you open it up in your web browser, because you will need this particularly for the hands-on opportunities that we will be covering. So this is where you're going to see, for example, the sample code and a few of the other things that really will be required for today's session. So please click that link or type it into your browser and make sure you have that ready for a little bit later on. Now, the big question, we're talking about class team automation. Why do we talk about automation, and why is this something that we've been hosting by popular demand? Well, as the name automation suggests, this really is around creating workflows that are scalable for your school, college, or university, allowing you to then save time for staff, meaning they do not need to then go through and manually create a class team. Also, we see it then reducing costs, the time and labor that it takes, for example, for those staff members to have to create teams, or for internal administrative staff to do things like managing the membership of the team itself. All of these things can be automated. And we also then, of course, one of the important things as we do see hybrid learning, such a topic and important thing right now, is making sure our students have a fantastic experience, whether they're physically in person with us or experiencing their classes and teaching remotely through an online environment like Microsoft Teams. How do we create that consistency for the students and for the staff members that they're able to then effectively use the online tools as part of their hybrid, remote, or another form of learning? So this is really where automation is such an important topic right now, as we're preparing for the return to teaching, or if you're watching the recording, maybe you've already begun teaching and you're wanting to streamline the workflows internally. Now, the important thing about the concepts that we are covering today is that it is using then a platform agnostic approach. So if you're saying, but I use this VLE or I use this student management system, effectively, when we're talking about the Microsoft Graph, these are REST APIs that are not dependent on a specific platform. So whether you're using, say, Canvas, Blackboard, Moodle, Banner, or one of the many other platforms that are available out there that you might want to either look to have data in sync with, or be able to then create automation flows to complement. This is really where you'll see it's how we then send the data between those platforms that allows us to then have these effective workflows and create automation solutions. And this is the key part of what we'll be covering today, the ability to map your data once and then automate those experiences. Now, you might be saying, all right, this is all sounding pretty good, but I want to see this tangible. Show me an example of where this is real. And that's exactly what's happening today at the University of East London. Yanel and the team there have done a fantastic example of taking advantage of the Microsoft Graph, where they have then firstly empowered their staff and students. So staff and students, for example, can self-create teams. They're using Office 365 governance to make sure that students are empowered to be able to, for example, have remote social spaces. But what they've also done is they're taking advantage of the capabilities of the Microsoft Graph, and they're automatically creating 3,000 class teams today. And so this is where you're going to see how they take information from the student information system, how that workflow goes into their VLE or learning management system, which in their example is Moodle, and then how they're using the Microsoft Graph to create a class team to then complement that Moodle course site. So this is the example from University of East London.
Hi, my name is Yanel Ersu, and I will be talking to you about how the University of East London automated the creation of a team for class based on our student record system and linked Teams with Moodle and other resources at UEL, and thus making Teams a single gateway where students access their required resources. The use of Teams at UEL was initially an IT initiative to promote and encourage communication and collaboration within the department, but we have rapidly acknowledged the potential of the platform in both professional teams as well as teaching and learning due to its deep, seamless integration with Microsoft 365 tools, safe environment for our students and colleagues to engage for synchronous and asynchronous teaching and learning, and scalable and adaptable, making it very easy to use on different platforms, mobile or otherwise. As we started to learn the platform's capabilities, we started to think how we can utilize Teams as a learning and teaching tool, and how we can do so with very little disturbance to faculty and students. We have over 3,000 modules running at different levels. If this was to work, we were not going to ask for these to be created manually. We had to think of a way to automatically create these, link it to our VLE and other resources students may need to access throughout their journey at the university. At that time, the integration between Teams and Moodle didn't offer what we were really planning to achieve. We wanted to create a team for class, automatically enroll the teaching team, and every student registered for that module. But we wanted this process to be a dynamic one. Students may change their modules, drop out, teaching teams may change without much notice, and so on. So we needed to create a system that will dynamically manage the membership for every team. Enter MuleSoft, an enterprise bus service that made all of this possible, linking our student information system, our VLE, and the graph to ultimately talk to each other and deliver what we wanted: automatic creation of teams for class and dynamic membership management. Of course, this was not plug and play. Last but not least, we relied on the skills of our integration specialist and other colleagues to make it all happen. So how does it all actually work? In SITS, in every module record, there is a flag which tells the integration engine that this particular module needs to have a team. There is a scheduled process that queries the SITS database for any module that has this flag and looks for modules that do not have a team created. For all modules in SITS database without a team record in the integration database, create a team record for this module flagged as new. For all records in the integration database ready for processing, an API is called to check if a Moodle site exists for that module. If it exists, a team is created which is based on a predefined template, and a Graph API is called to add all relevant tabs and channels and flag these as having been created. A Moodle tab is added using a website tab, pointing at the URL of that respective module, as well as other resources. When the lockdown occurred, we were only a few days away to actually implementing this system, and we were able to make this happen very quickly, creating over 3,000 teams and added thousands of students and staff automatically to these teams over a weekend. We primarily created inactive teams, giving the teaching staff time to prepare content and get the team ready. When ready, the module leader would simply click on the activate button and students would start being enrolled. If a Moodle site did not exist, a team would not be created but added to a queue where it would be checked again in a few days. All create requests to the Graph API are tracked and flagged in the integration database, so it can be picked up where it left off when the Graph API calls are throttled or fail for whatever reason. Once the modules were created, intensive training went on. I have personally trained over 600 professional and academic staff, as well as approximately 1,000 students, on how to work, teach and learn remotely using Teams in a couple of weeks. Of course, this training was delivered using Microsoft Teams. What you are seeing now is a team created by our integration engine, with the name of the team matching that of the record in SITS and Moodle, and with the channels and tabs easily directing students to library resources, study skills, and Moodle, as well as the default tabs that a team for class comes with. Below, you will see the integration engine at work, having removed a user from the team automatically. Once the user clicks on the Moodle tab, They will be directed to the respective Moodle site without having to leave the Teams environment, and using SSO, single sign-on, they will be admitted to the site without having to sign in again. It has been recognised that students could very much benefit from using Teams fully, and therefore we have allowed them to create their own teams and invite their peers, of course all based on clear governance and policies to control the number of inactive teams and maintain a tidy household. They have embraced this fully, and since the lockdown they have created their own community to cope with the situation and stay in touch. At the University of East London, it has been agreed that a blended learning approach will be used in the upcoming academic year, with Teams being the platform used to deliver the online element, record lectures via stream, communicating via chat and team posts, and use Teams as a research tool. This slide gives you an idea of the usage of Teams at the university, with just under 15,000 active users, over 9,000 active channels, all in approximately 6,000 teams in total, and just under 50,000 meetings organised, to point to just a few stats in the last 90 days. The platform has seen a huge uptake from staff and students in the last few months, and will continue to do so in the years to come as more and more features are delivered. Thank you.
So that's a tremendous example from the team at University of East London. And one of the things that you would have heard mention was the ability to have that activate button. And so that is the ability where when you create a class team automatically, you can then have it in a pending state that only the educator can then access it, and the students cannot view it until that educator is ready. And so here's a screenshot in the top right from Kingston University, who have achieved exactly that. You'll notice what they have is it says there is a button across the top of the class team. And so that's where it gives you the ability to then, where it says the slightly zoomed in example, 9 students are waiting to join, click activate. This is extremely useful because I get a lot of feedback and a lot of questions of, well, how do we have an area where our academics can prepare their courses before then students can join? Or what happens if we create a class team, but maybe the educator doesn't end up using it? This is exactly what you need to be able to make sure that your environment is being then effectively managed, where again, now the educator has the ability to be informed in terms of being able to prepare the course materials, click activate when they are ready. And you'll notice we do even have an API that allows you as the IT administrators also to be able to activate that. So some really fantastic and useful things that you have as part of this. All right, so in that regard, let's head across and jump into a bit of an overview of the difference now between the Microsoft Graph and one of the other topics we'll be talking about, which is school data sync. So we have some options available for you, because absolutely within Microsoft, we appreciate not everyone will have access to, say, some of the internal skills to be able to do things like scripting the Microsoft Graph APIs. And so this is where you have a no-code solution to automatically create class teams called School Data Sync. What it does is it allows you to then create an automatic workflow where you export data from your student information system, and then what it'll do is then bring that across and then automatically create the class teams for you. So it manages all of the logic. Importantly, School Data Sync is free for education, so there is no cost to use either School Data Sync. When we come to the Microsoft Graph, it's free to use. The thing to keep in mind with the Graph is it gives you the full control of the team's lifecycle, from creation to archival. But it does require you to actually create that workflow yourself. So you can kind of think of it as School Data Sync, no code, but it's very much a sort of a fixed offering, or the Graph gives you all of the control, but you do need to decide how you want to manage that. And so this is where it does give you enhanced capabilities that are not available within School Data Sync, where you can then do things like pre-install apps. A great example was from University of East London, how they have a website tab, which is a link back to their VLE, and that could be any learning management system that has a web app experience. This is where you can then do things like be able to then archive the team, and it is an important one to be able to then really get that full set of capabilities and create the most standardized experience where you have then that granular control, and we'll talk more about that shortly. So what is the core concept of how does this all work? Well, this is effectively it. It's the idea that we have the ability to go through and take information just like you have today from your student information system. You would typically have a workflow that automatically takes the course roster, the students, the educators, the classes, and then that information is being sent to your learning management system. That could be, for example, Moodle, Blackboard, Canvas, Desire to Learn, or one of the others. The idea is then taking a copy of that data and then sending it to Office 365 and Microsoft Teams. And we achieve this then using the school data sync or the Microsoft Graph APIs, as you saw in the example from the University of East London. What this means is we are now then, because that's the same data set being sent across, the two platforms are then in sync. So this is how we can then have our Canvas course, our Blackboard site, or our Moodle site have the same membership and have a class team created to complement that learning environment. One of the things that's extremely useful about Microsoft Teams, of course, and why we see it being used so much within courses is in addition to all of the online meetings capabilities, it's also a tool that is being used in the workplace. So if we think about our students, and the experience for our students. This is then helping them also develop job-ready skills that they can take into the workplace. And it's a key piece of feedback that we're seeing students that desire to be not just using technology, but using technology that will help them when they transition into the workforce. As I mentioned, one of the core capabilities, of course, with Microsoft Teams is that it does have a robust set of online meeting capabilities to then support remote and hybrid learning scenarios. And when we have a class team created, that gives us many benefits. And so I'll give an example here. You have the ability to create two types of meetings within Microsoft Teams. You can do an ad hoc one-off meeting. So that's when you send, like, say, a few people a meeting invite. That is a meeting in isolation. What we're talking about then is one of the big benefits of having a class team created is also to support online learning. That's where you can then host a meeting in the context of that team. And that is then called a channel meeting. And you'll notice in the right-hand side, I have then my B102 Business Studies course, and then I can select, for example, to host my online lesson in week 1 entrepreneurship. What this means is it provides many benefits. It means that my students, even if they don't attend the live session, they're able to view the recording afterwards. It means then if my students, of course, receive a calendar invite, but also students, for example, who may come late to the session or miss it, or then want to be able to go back and review because they might have only joined in week 2. This is where everything stays in context of that class team, and it also makes it much easier for educators to be able to then share the recordings back within the team itself, because everyone who has access to that Office 365 group will then have access to the recording when it is provided to them. So this is a really useful capability that we have, and that's why class teams are so important, not just to have a space to have, say, conversations, but to also have effective online synchronous lessons. So let's go into the options that we have. And the first one that I shared, which is the no-code managed offering, School Data Sync, is available to you from sds.microsoft.com. And where that goes is then you'll notice you have a web portal. As an administrator for your environment, you can go in, you can then set up your school data sync profiles, and this is how you can then have that workflow. So you're taking a copy of the data, and then that flows across into Office 365. School data sync is then using things like the graph behind the scenes to automatically create teams, and then that becomes a managed service that, for example, every 24 hours gets an updated set of information. And let me show you what that workflow looks like. So you create a sync profile. A then CSV file format is uploaded, or if you're using things like OneRoster, there is existing APIs. That then gets sent across. Using then the school data sync format, that then has a level of validation just to make sure the data looks okay. And at that point, then it goes into Office 365 and starts to sync with Azure Active Directory, of course, to make sure the identities are correct. And then that flows through to the Office 365 groups. For example, then on day one, it might receive a brand new class. Let's go with the B102 Business Studies course. If there is no existing class created, it'll automatically create the class team. It'll look at the students, it'll look at the educators, and it of course will then create the educators as the team owners, the students as the team members, and then it's automatically created. Let's say 2 days later that 2 students leave and 1 new student joins, it then sees that there is a difference now in the class roster, and it automatically removes, say, those 2 students, and then automatically adds in the new student, say Sally Smith, and then the next time Sally opens up Teams, she will then see the class team that she is now a part of. So School Data Sync, as mentioned, it's available free for education. That's how you can then go through and use the School Data Sync portal to be able to set it up. One of the things that I have heard in the past is, well, what about if I'm in further or higher education? This is where School Data Sync have announced the version 2 format. And so what that means is it is then revised and enhanced to much better support than also further and higher education. So if you're a university or a college, you will have a much better experience now to map your data back to the file formats. And of course, Microsoft Fast Track is available to help with deployment. So this is where you have then School Data Sync as the option where no code's required. You just need to then make sure you correctly map your data as it then flows into SDS, and then that will automatically create your class teams. One thing to also highlight, as part of the Microsoft app ecosystem, we now also have an app for Moodle. So for those who are using Moodle today, this is where you can then automatically create it automatically creates class teams. And as part of this, what it'll do is then integrate the Moodle calendar, the materials within the course site, the activity feed, single sign-on, and then Schooler, who are the creators of the Moodle app for Teams, they also have a deployment service that they can provide to you to be able to then go through and again, deploy in a very, very quick and easy way. So anyone that's using Moodle right now, I would highly encourage that you simply click on apps within Microsoft Teams. And from the App Store in Teams, simply search Moodle and you'll notice the Moodle dashboard is available. Click on that and that has all of the information that you need to get started with the Moodle app. So there we go. We have School Data Sync as an automated option. That's no coding required. For those that are using Moodle as their learning management system, we have the Moodle app. And for those that are looking for more granular control, or you might be using, say, Canvas, Blackboard, Desire to Learn, or you really want to have management over every step of the team's lifecycle, this is where the Microsoft Graph is for you. Because the Microsoft Graph really gives you that control as every single stage in the team lifecycle, there is an API available, and that means you can then fully control the creation of a team, adding members, configuring team settings, adding channels, installing apps automatically, adding in tabs like we saw University of East London were doing with a website view of their learning management system. And then of course, at the end of that course, the ability to archive or delete the team. And this is really where the Microsoft Graph gives you that full control across the entire life cycle. And so I get a few questions and I say, well, hang on, but Dominic, I've been using PowerShell. One thing to keep in mind is whilst PowerShell is good for some traditional management tasks, it does not give you the full automation capabilities that the Microsoft Graph does. So this is where, yes, PowerShell does give you some abilities over Teams, but if you want the more modern and more powerful management capabilities that gives you control over every step of the cycle, this is where the Microsoft Graph is really the next step and the ability to be able to fully manage teams at scale and that life cycle. So as a quick snapshot on the difference between the API offerings, so you'll notice the PowerShell. Of course, one of the challenges is with PowerShell that it often requires multiple different commandlets to be able to go through. And you'll notice to be able to manage teams, we need to go through use Teams, Exchange, Azure AD. Notice on the right-hand side, the Microsoft Graph gives you significantly more capabilities and many that you can simply not do with PowerShell. Particularly on those bottom few rows, you can manage apps, you can manage tabs, cloning of teams, interacting with messages in teams, archiving of teams. All of that is only possible with the Microsoft Graph. So for those who are new to Microsoft Graph, I wanted to take a quick second to just do a quick overview of it. And then we're going to start going hands-on specifically around creating teams using the graph, and you'll get a chance to do that as well. So for anyone that might be new to Microsoft Team, I should say the Microsoft Graph, effectively it is your gateway into the data within the Office 365 and Microsoft 365 cloud. Effectively, what it is, it's us providing a clean, single set of APIs that give you access and automation workflows across the data within your tenant. So this is where the graph is a really powerful tool to be able to then interact not just with Microsoft Teams, but it's the same place you go to be able to interact with the calendar. So for example, automatically create calendar events, to be able to interact with mail, files, say in OneDrive or SharePoint, your Office 365 groups, and users within your environment. And then this becomes that single layer where you can then interact with all of those different parts of Office 365. Now, for anyone that is brand new to the graph, fear not, you are in the right place, because we're going to be starting with the key basics that you need to be able to use the graph with Microsoft Teams. So effectively, the graph is a set of REST APIs that you can then use, or you can access it via an SDK. And so this is how we then call on those graph endpoints. The nice thing about this is flexible for you in your preferred way that you want to engage with the graph. So this is where you can actually make requests to the graphs in multiple different ways, whatever your preference is, using HTTP, C#, JavaScript, Objective-C, and there's also many blogs out there how you can even use PowerShell to call aspects of the Microsoft Graph. And you'll notice on the right-hand side is just a really quick snapshot example of just how simple the graph can be to call. In this example here, it's creating a team. All we do is we then request the Teams API, and you'll notice in 3 lines with an open and closing bracket, because what this is a JSON request. It simply has the type of template we want to create, education class, my class team as a display name, and description. So it's actually a really nice, very easy to then manipulate language, because effectively it's just using JSON in this example here, and then calling the right endpoint. So there's a few key operations to be aware of, and then we'll start getting hands-on with trying out and making some of our own Graph API calls ourselves. Now, for today, you really only need to know 3 things, which is really, really lovely. Effectively, when we make a call to the Microsoft Graph, we have the intent. So for example, we want to list some information, we want to get some information, we want to create something. That is then a HTTP method. So, if I want to have a list of something, I'm getting a list or I'm getting information around a member. So that's where we use the get method. And then, for example, if I want to create something, well, I'm sending you an instruction to do something, or I'm posting an instruction. And that's why we use a post method to be able to then create something like a new team. So if we're then looking at how that applies within the Microsoft Graph endpoint, you'll notice the example on the right-hand side. We get /users, or we get /users /NID, because it's an ID for, let's say, a user. Or we can then post some information because we want to create a team, and therefore we post that to the Teams API. So let me give a little bit more of an example of how that worked within what you saw from the University of East London. So this is where they had the workflow that Yanel was taking you through a little bit earlier. And that's where they have a scheduled process that queries their student information database. It then looks for their predefined flag and says, okay, I now need to go and create a class team. And that's what I've highlighted in yellow. Create a new class team for the class template using, for a class using a template. And so this is exactly where they go through and they do a create, which is a post method, and then they create a team itself. If I do a double click on exactly how that works, this is then taking literally the screenshot from the public Microsoft Graph documentation, and everything that we'll be talking about today is all part of the Microsoft Graph public documentation. So this is really these screenshots that you're seeing, you have access to all of this that you can share with your colleagues, and you can go back to as many times as you need. And so this is exactly where you'll see, for example, when I go through, the very first line of the example that we see here is the type of command, the endpoint I need to call, which is post https graph.microsoft.com/beta/teams, because we need to call the Teams API, which is the request that we're making to. Next, we send it the request body. So I simply go through and I said, provided that JSON, which always requires an open bracket and a closed bracket. And so this is where I go through and I can see here, firstly, we call the Teams template education class, give it a display name, and we then give it a description. Last but not least, the Microsoft Graph, of course, has security as a core piece of the way that it's defined. So no, not any user in your environment can call the graph. Only yourselves as administrators with the correct permissions can then approve and select the permissions required to even make this graph API call. And so that's why we then see here the types of permissions. In this example, to create a team, we need group read write all and directory read write all, because we're creating an Office 365 group, which is fundamental to a Microsoft team. But effectively, that's it. With just those three parts, we now have the request we send, the body, which is what it actually needs to do. In this example, create my class team, and then making sure we have the permissions to actually do that within your environment. So this is where you might be saying, all right, Dominic, this is looking pretty good. I really want to get started with it. How do I begin? And so this is where we have a great way for you to start practicing and start also using, whether you're a new time or first time person using the graph, or you're someone who has had extensive experience. The way that we really learn all of the capabilities of the Microsoft Graph is using the Graph Explorer. The Graph Explorer is simply a tool that allows you to focus on the requests that you want to make rather than having to write out all of the extra logic. And so this is a fantastic way, either as a first-time developer, a first-time service integrator, or IT pro. This is where then, as any IT admin can then go here, log in, and then start exploring and using then the Microsoft Graph APIs. And so this is really where it's the perfect place for us to begin today. All right, so let me take you through an example of me using the graph and the Graph Explorer, and then I'm going to get you to follow along in the activity after I've shown you what it looks like. So here I am in the Microsoft Graph Explorer, and let me take you through the first time login experience. All right, so of course, the first thing we need to do is sign into the Graph Explorer. If it's your first time signing in, this is of course where you sign in with the account, and notice how it asks for permissions. Click Accept. This is why, of course, for anyone that doesn't have a test environment, we made sure we provided you with the test environment details for today. Now that I'm logged in, and you'll notice my demo environment is called, my name is Ken Meyer in this example. This is, of course, a real Office 365 tenant, so everything you're seeing here is real. I can go down on the left-hand side, scroll down, and straight I can even see Microsoft Teams examples. And I can simply click Get My Joined Teams. It's just that easy. But hang on a second. Forbidden 303. You need to consent to the permissions. Click the Modify Permissions tab. Remember, we always need the correct permissions as part of that security to be able to make sure we can call the Microsoft Graph. And in this example, to be able to call the graph to see the teams that I'm a part of, it requires a few permissions to be consented to. So this is where I simply go through and then click on consent. And what this is meaning is that for my user that I'm logged in as, this user in example here, Ken, has the ability to go through and then make these Graph API requests. And of course, the reason that I'm able to consent is because Ken has the administrator credentials that Ken allows the ability to consent. If I was just an end user like a student and I tried to consent here, it would not allow me to because I don't have the Office 365 admin privileges. But because I do as Ken, there we go, you can see there I've now consented. So make sure I scroll through and I've gone through and I've said, yep, consented for the required permissions. And now just like that, I can click run query. And notice the /me/join teams, just like that, I can now see the teams that myself is a member of. And notice the Office 365 group ID, the display name for my business school staff, and within a quick second, I can see exactly the same team in the Teams UI as the Microsoft Graph has shown me. So that's it. Really nice, really easy, and I didn't have to even type anything in. The Graph Explorer allows me to get started with just a few clicks. No copy paste even required. One thing I will always highlight is notice the response preview. The response preview gives you all of the critical information that you need as part of more complex workflows. For example, if you wanted to add more members to an Office 365 group, it will need to have the group ID. And just like that, you saw it easily returned the Office 365 group ID for my business school staff. Really nice, really easy for you to be able to then get started. So in this example, this is where I'm now going to give you 3 minutes to follow along and do exactly what I just shared with you. So this is where I'm going to invite everyone now to go through and to open up your web browser. And in your web browser, we have a nice short link for you, which is aka.ms/GE for Graph Explorer. And I'll also post this into the chat, into the announcement window. So what you need to do in the next 3 minutes is log into the Graph Explorer with your test account or your sandbox environment, or really whatever environment that you have that's appropriate for you to use right now. And we did provide a free one as part of the setup instructions for anyone that didn't already have it for today. And this is where go through, make sure you accept the permissions, and then run the query to be able to get your joined teams. All right, you've got 3 minutes. Please go ahead and complete 1, 2, 3, and get yourself ready with the Graph Explorer and run potentially your first Graph API command. Lovely. So remember, if you have any questions, please use the chat window on the left hand, I should say the right hand side. Now heading across to our next activity. Let's go through and now create a team. So to create a team, this is where I'll show you how I've created the team, and then we'll do it together. So in this regard, this is where I go ahead and I just looking at the Microsoft Docs. So this is the public facing documentation. Again, everything is available to you as part of the public information. So of course you can find this with your search engine or of course at docs.microsoft.com. So what I can do here is I can see I want to create a team, and that's the post that I was talking about earlier, beta/teams, because we want to create something. So notice I go over, I click on post, beta, and I'll talk about that. We're using beta for right now. These will be going to 1.0 very, very soon, and I'll cover that towards the end of today. And then quite simply, we copy across the 3 lines and then also the opening and closing curly braces. Notice I'm using the standard team. So for anyone here that's using the test environment, of course, it's an enterprise account, so you can only use the standard team. But one thing to keep in mind is I didn't check my permissions first. So always go to modify permissions before you click run. And look at that, we need to click consent. So make sure I consent, so I do have the permissions to be able to run the create team request. In this example, it's the group read write all. Let's just go back over to that request body and now paste in exactly the right information. Lovely. And now we go through and click run query. Notice when I go over to Teams, there it is, my sample team has been created. A quick note here, for anyone that is using the Microsoft developer account, which was the sandbox environment, if you don't already have a sandbox environment set up, that Microsoft developer account is using an enterprise account. So that means that's why we're going to be using the standard team type. And then, of course, when you move across into your Office 365 education tenancy, that's when you can create the class teams. For anyone that has a sandbox account in a class, I should say in an education tenant, that's where, of course, you can then please use the class team type. The reason I'm using the standard team just temporarily is so everyone who is joining us today has the ability to go ahead and create a standard team, and then we can then just change the variable to create that class team type. All right, so let's do that now as an activity. So this is where we head across and we're going to do a post command. Let me quickly drop that link so you have that information into the chat window. So as a quick reminder, this time now you will need to go across and then click on the link itself, which is giving you access to the aka.ms/Teams Today IT. So let me just bring that up in the browser. So when you go to that URL, you'll notice here it takes you to OneDrive. As part of OneDrive, we then have the activity sample code. So that way, just to make it easy to copy and paste, and this is just the same as you have on the Microsoft Docs site. So please make sure you go to the short link, and I've also provided it in the chat window for you. So now please create your first team using then the provided sample file. So we've got 1:30 to do that. So remember, step 1 is switch it now to post because we're posting a request. Step 2 is now update it so it's /beta/teams. So there's the full URL. Make sure you then click on modify permissions and check that you have consented to the required permissions. And then the third part is, of course, go ahead and then click and then add the request body, which is part of activity 2, the sample file that's provided in aka.ms/Teams Today IT. Fantastic. Okay, so what that will do is, of course, go through and you should now see a team that has been created, and it would be exactly the same as the process you saw me do just a few moments earlier. So that's where I went through, I clicked create, and then of course we went here to the activity2 file. And notice we have now, make sure if you did get an error at all that you do have both the opening and closing curly brace, and then you copy that across. Now, remember I said we're using the standard type just currently for anyone who's using the test environment using the Microsoft developer account. Of course, that's just an enterprise environment. And I'll show you in a moment later how we can then just simply change that to be the education class, which creates the class team. Okay, so what you should now have is if you go back over into Teams itself, this is where you'll notice you've actually now just created a brand new team. For anyone that, for example, might not have access to that brand new team, this is where you'll want to make sure that go ahead and just check particularly that you have consented to the APIs and that you haven't missed any of those curly braces. So remember at the beginning, if it showed up and it had the 303 forbidden, and then it says, you need to request the correct permissions, that quite simply meant I needed to go through and then use the correct permissions required. And so the Graph Explorer, that's what's so great about it, is it's showing me the things that I need to be aware of to then help me practice this before I then write my own logic, for example, in my environment itself. All right, so let's take things one step further now. And what we're going to do is create a team one more time, but we're going to do that team slightly differently. Now, you'll notice we're going to do the same steps as before, but we're going to use activity file 3. Now, you might be saying, well, Dominic, I just created a team. What's the difference here? There's a very, very important difference. And this is when we think back to the University of East London example, how they were then pre-creating not just the class team, but they were pre-creating the team with set channels and even pre-pinned tabs like the website tab for their learning environment, or having things like different apps pre-installed. So you'll notice if I head over back now to the web browser, and if we go to activity file 3, This is a much longer set of JSON. So what we need to do is make sure that you select everything and then copy that whole thing across. And this is where we've got now a minute, and I'll explain exactly what this is doing in 1 minute's time. So what we're now going to do is activity 3 is creating a team with a template, and you'll see the difference with this shortly. All right, so let's head over into Teams and let's do that one together. So all I need to simply do is go ahead, copy everything in the Graph Explorer, paste it in, and you'll notice here that we have a few interesting things. Post, beta, and then I'll go ahead and you'll notice it's creating, I'm calling this one technical writing. You could call it whatever you'd like, and well, let's go ahead. Now I simply go ahead and click Run Query. And then accepted 202. All right, so now that we've created that, what's actually happening? So now I'm going to head back over into Teams. And notice I have my technical writing 505, which is the one I just updated a few seconds ago. Now you might be saying, well, Dominic, this kind of looks the same as before. What's different here? And the difference is the graph is now going in through and managing all of the logic for you to be able to not just create the team, but you'll notice over the next few minutes, it's going to create the channels, it's going to add the apps, it's even going to customize the apps. And that's what this template is doing. So it's managing all of that extra logic for you. You're not having to now write additional APIs to add things like channels. Notice here how we then have a channel which is called display name week 1, display name week 2. So we're actually going to be creating the channels as well. Notice when my general channel, we're actually even then pre-adding apps, which is exactly how University of East London were able to have things like their LMS webpage. And in this example, I'm just going to take a generic URL, but of course you could take the URL to your learning management system or another website content that you want students to view. Notice we can then even pre-configure things like the YouTube tab. And then that will have, for example, the YouTube video available to be able to use. All right, so let's go through a few more things, and then I'll show you that when it's complete. So heading across now to add a channel. And I know this is a bit of a longer webinar today, so we will just need a few more minutes to wrap up for the webinar. So we'll go just a little bit past the hour. So to be able to create a channel, this is where you'll notice if I go through, I can go ahead and I can now click on the channel itself, allows me to go through and one thing I want to do, of course, when I create that channel is I need the group ID for the team. So remember, this is why we sometimes go back and do things like the get teams or get the teams that I'm a member of, because it allows me to see that group ID. Now that I have the group ID, I can then use that ID to be able to then correctly create the channel, of course, in the correct team. So notice here when I go over and then I can replace where it says team ID, I replace it with the ID for the team, which is exactly the same as the Office 365 group. I can then click Run Query. And then just like that, what it's done is it's now said, I want to go through and then create my team. And I've now added in this example, my architecture discussion channel to my sample team that I created earlier. There we go. Just like that, I can use the graph to add a channel manually, or notice we were using a template before to add multiple channels in one go. What about now, speaking of adding multiple members or multiple channels, adding multiple members as a batch process? This is where I can go through and I've got the ability to then use the Microsoft Graph to create, I should say, to add a batch of users. So I'll just show a few users, but again, this is where you could add as many users as you need to that class team. So again, we're going to post some information. This time it's /batch. And what I've done here is, of course, I've replaced it with then the team ID that I want my users to be added to. And I'm also then using the ID of my users that the user will have. So this is simply that ID that they have as part of Azure Active Directory. Notice when I go across back to my team now, I have the ability here to see now I was able to add 3 members instantly. And of course, you could add many more members than that. This is just the example for today. Now, at the end of the life cycle, we've created a team, we've added channels, we've added members. There's been a really great semester or term that's passed. One of the other fantastic things we can do with the graph is also archive teams. What that does is it makes them go to a read-only state. And so everything I'm showing you here is publicly available APIs. I just want to show an example of how these look when they're being done, because just in the interest of time, we're not going to be able to go through each of them one by one as a hands-on activity. But notice again, it's all public information. So just from docs.microsoft.com, I can see to be able to archive a team, I simply need that team ID. So again, I just need to go ahead and grab that team ID. So if you put it into Notepad, then you'll already have it handy, or I can just always go and get the teams that I'm a member of. And then simply /teams/ID. So this is where I go ahead, post. Notice this is a version 1.0 /teams /the ID /archive. And then you also have the JSON where you could also change the SharePoint online site itself. I simply click Run Query. Notice it says accepted. And now I can head back over into Teams. This team was archived, so you can't make any changes. So this is a great one if you want students to still be able to view their courses, maybe for revision as they move from a first year to a second year, but they're not going to be able to go and make any changes to it. The last topic that I'll cover as part of the graph, which is one of the top ones that a lot of people are asking about, is how do we create that activate button, for example, that Kingston University have, that UEL were referring to. Quite simply, the activate button is created in 2 parts. Part 1, we create an Office 365 group of type class. And then part 2, we add a class team to the Office 365 group. Because remember, teams are always sitting on top of Office 365 groups. And effectively what we're doing is by stepping up from a group to a team, we're able to then activate that button, which is basically saying, okay, you're turning into a class, but I want you to pause until that teacher or educator is ready. So the way that we do this, you'll notice again, everything here is publicly available on the website. I simply go over, I need to do a create the group. Notice I did highlight that it's an application permission required. So application permissions do require that you host the app somewhere. I'm just doing this in Azure, makes it really easy to do. And then in the interest of time, I've pre-created the Office 365 group. So notice I'm in my Azure Active Directory and I'm looking at my Math 301. When I go into Teams, I have not yet turned that into a team, so it's not appearing here. So to do that, all I need to do is go through and create a team from an Office 365 group. So notice how I simply can go ahead, and when I go back to the Graph Explorer, I can go and now take that Office 365 group that I have created. Now I can then here update the template to be education class. And last but not least, I'm going to put in that group ID for my Math 301. Remember, I can also query it, whether I use the graph to get that group ID, or I can just go back and copy it across like I did there from the Azure AD portal. And now I simply am ready to go. I'm going to turn this existing group into a class team. Clicking Run Query. Lovely, there we go, accepted, green, nice 202. And you'll notice when I head back over to Teams now, that Math 301 has Ken and Kara as the educators. So when I log in as Ken, notice now how I am Ken, and there is my Math 301 class with the 10 students are waiting to join, and now I can click Activate. So this is the really fantastic part that you also get when you go through and then create your teams and use these automation capabilities. let's load that up in 2 seconds, and I'll just do a really quick overview. So remember how we created that templated team. What did that JSON do? Well, remember how I took you through, it had then channels that were pre-created, it had a practice exam channel, and now notice if you switch back to your Teams client, with that one command that you ran, everything is now automatically made. Notice when I go over and click on LMS web page, this is my website URL, and of course, whatever website URL that you choose it to be. I can see here week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. Notice that it's also automatically added my apps. So this is where I have my poll app, Polly. I have Kahoot, that's been pre-added. And if I go over to my practice exam channel, this is where I can even see things like a YouTube. The YouTube app has a YouTube video that has been already configured, so it's ready to go for people to watch. So this could be a welcome video from the university, or in this example, we're talking about my technical writing TW 505 class that I have created. So this is really bringing it all together, and that's where you should now be able to see that class team has been fully generated. I should say that standard team has been generated, and of course you can then change that to a class type if you're in an Office 365 education environment. So to wrap up for today, just a few last things. Frequently asked questions that I do get a lot. All right, well, I've used the graph today, and I used to use the Graph Explorer. Do I use the Graph Explorer in production? So no. The graph, of course, you'd be using in production, but you'd be using it as part of an automated process. Like you saw me within the Azure portal, I had an app that was sitting there calling the graph. And you can see here from University of East London, that's exactly what they had with their scheduled process. And that's what's calling the APIs. The Graph Explorer is just a way to practice how you use the graph. So we used some beta APIs today. When are they going version 1.0? So those are expected to go to 1.0 later this month. This is awesome. Who can I work with if I need help using the Microsoft Graph? And that is where we have our Microsoft partners are there to help you deploy, configure, and make this real. So this is where you can save a huge amount of time by working with Microsoft partners who have managed offerings to allow you to configure the graph and to help you then set it up. And that's someone I would highly recommend that you work with. Just simply search the Microsoft Partners website for a partner near you. Let's wrap up today's session. This is where we covered a lot of content, and you've seen now a real example from the University of East London, how they're automating thousands of classes at a time, the options that you have available with School Data Sync, the ability to then use the Microsoft Graph to automate each step of that team's life cycle. And then we finished, of course, going hands-on, and I hope you've now got some teams that you're looking at right now that have been automatically created. Congratulations to you. And that's where it brings our session to a close. Thank you so much for your time today. I hope you found it to be useful, and have a great rest of your day.